At my sister's wedding, I was given a neon wristband. The usher said, "This means you're not allowed in the reception hall." Her bridesmaid snickered. "It's for non-essential guests." I looked around. Even her gym trainer got in. So I walked over to the gift table, took back the envelope with the $6,000 check, and said, "Good thing this wasn't essential either." She came running after me, yelling my name in front of everyone. I, 29M, never thought I'd be writing this, but after what happened at my sister's wedding last weekend, I need to get this off my chest. The whole situation has blown up into something I never expected, and my family is acting like I'm the villain here. Let me start from the beginning. My sister and I have always had a complicated relationship. She's 3 years younger, and ever since we were kids, she's had this way of making everything about her. Our parents always said it was just her personality, that she was spirited and knew what she wanted. I learned early on to just go along with it to keep the peace. When she got engaged 8 months ago, I was genuinely happy for her. Her fiancé seemed like a decent guy, and I thought marriage might help her mature a bit. I offered to help with wedding expenses since I knew money was tight for them. She seemed grateful at the time, hugging me and saying I was the best brother ever. That should have been my first red flag. Over the months leading up to the wedding, I noticed she was becoming increasingly demanding about every detail. She'd call me crying about centerpieces, then rage about the DJ, then panic about the weather forecast. I chalked it up to wedding stress and tried to be supportive. When she asked if I could increase my financial contribution because costs were spiraling, I agreed. We settled on $6,000 total, not a small amount for me, but I wanted her day to be perfect. The morning of the wedding, I arrived at the venue feeling proud. I'd bought a new suit, got a fresh haircut, and was actually looking forward to celebrating my sister. The ceremony was beautiful, and she looked genuinely happy. For a moment, I thought maybe all the stress and drama had been worth it. Then came the reception. As guests moved from the ceremony site to the reception hall, I noticed everyone was being given wristbands by the ushers. I assumed it was just a way to identify wedding guests from other hotel patrons. When I approached the usher, a guy I recognized as one of her fiancé's college friends, he handed me a bright neon green wristband. The color immediately struck me as odd. Everyone else I'd seen had gotten white or cream-colored bands that matched the wedding colors. Mine looked like something you'd get at a music festival. When I asked about it, the usher just shrugged and told me it was what I was supposed to get. I put it on and walked toward the reception hall entrance, but the person checking wristbands at the door stopped me. She told me that neon green meant I wasn't allowed in the main reception hall. I stood there confused, thinking there had to be some mistake. I explained that I was the bride's brother, but she just pointed to my wristband again and repeated that neon green guests weren't permitted in the reception area. I asked where I was supposed to go, and she directed me to a smaller room off to the side. When I walked in, I found about a dozen other people with the same neon green wristbands. Most of them looked as confused as I felt. There was my elderly aunt who lived across the country and rarely saw my sister, a few family friends I recognized, and some people I didn't know at all. The room had a couple of round tables, some basic decorations that looked like leftovers from the main reception setup, and a small buffet with what appeared to be significantly less elaborate food than what I could glimpse being served in the main hall. There was no DJ, no dancing, no speeches, just awkward conversation among a group of people trying to figure out why they'd been segregated. One of my sister's bridesmaids walked through our room at one point, and I asked her what was going on with the wristband system. She laughed and told me it was for non-essential guests. She said it so casually, like it was the most normal thing in the world. When I pressed her on what that meant, she explained that the main reception was for important people and that this room was for everyone else. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Non-essential. After contributing $6,000 to this wedding, after years of supporting my sister through every drama and crisis, I was relegated to the kids' table equivalent of wedding guests. I walked back toward the main reception hall to see if I could spot my sister and talk to her directly. Through the doorway, I could see the elaborate setup I'd helped pay for, the upgraded flowers, the premium bar package, the fancy linens. I watched as her gym trainer, someone she'd known for maybe 6 months, walked freely through the main reception with his white wristband. Her gym trainer, someone who spotted her at the gym twice a week, got VIP treatment while her brother was stuck in exile. That's when something inside me snapped. All the years of putting up with her demanding behavior, All the times I'd bitten my tongue to keep family peace. All the money I'd spent to make her day special. And this is how she chose to treat me. Not just ignore me or forget about me, but actively exclude me and label me as non-essential. I walked straight to the gift table near the main entrance. I found my envelope, a thick white envelope with her name written in my handwriting, containing a $6,000 check. I picked it up and put it in my jacket pocket. Then I announced loudly enough for nearby guests to hear that since I apparently wasn't essential to this celebration, my gift wasn't essential either. The reaction was immediate. Several people turned to stare, and I could hear whispers starting to spread. I felt a mix of satisfaction and anger coursing through me. For once, I wasn't going to be the accommodating brother who just accepted whatever treatment my sister dished out. I made it maybe 20 feet toward the exit before I heard my sister screaming my name. Her voice carried across the entire venue, cutting through music and conversation. I turned to see her pushing through the crowd, her wedding dress bunched up in her hands as she tried to move faster. She reached me just as I got to the main door, and her face was a combination of panic and fury. She demanded to know what I was doing, why I was leaving, where her gift was. I told her calmly that non-essential people don't give essential gifts. Her face went white when she realized what I'd done. She started crying and saying it wasn't what it looked like, that the wristband thing was her future mother-in-law's idea, that she didn't know I'd been put in the other room. But I'd already seen her bridesmaid's reaction. This wasn't some mistake or misunderstanding. This was intentional. I told her I hoped she enjoyed her perfect wedding with all her essential people, and I walked out. Behind me, I could hear the growing murmur of confused guests and my sister's continued protests. I got in my car and drove home, feeling both vindicated and completely drained. Update 1. The fallout started before I even got home. My phone was buzzing constantly with calls and texts from family members. Apparently, my sister had some kind of breakdown after I left, and the reception had to be paused while they dealt with the drama. My parents called me furious, saying I'd ruined my sister's wedding day over a simple misunderstanding. They insisted the wristband thing was just poor planning and that I should have handled it privately instead of making a scene. When I explained about being called a non-essential guest, my mother said I was being too sensitive and that weddings are complicated events with lots of logistics. But then my aunt, the one who'd also been given a neon green wristband, called me. She told me she'd done some investigating after I left and learned more about the wristband system. Apparently, my sister and her fiancé had divided all their guests into 3 categories: VIPs who got white bands and access to everything, regular guests who got cream bands and access to most areas, and what they internally called obligation invites, who got neon green bands and were restricted to the side room. The obligation invites were people they felt they had to invite for family or social reasons, but didn't actually want at their main celebration. It included elderly relatives, plus ones they didn't know well, work colleagues they couldn't avoid inviting, and apparently me. Learning that it was a deliberate system made everything worse. This wasn't a misunderstanding or poor communication. They had actively planned to exclude certain guests and had put me in the category of people they were obligated to invite but didn't want around. My sister kept trying to call me, but I wasn't ready to talk. Her voicemails went from apologetic to angry to desperate. In one, she admitted that yes, there had been different categories of guests, but insisted it wasn't personal and that lots of couples do similar things. She claimed she didn't realize how it would feel to be on the receiving end. Her fiancé texted me saying I'd embarrassed his new wife and ruined their wedding photos because she'd been crying and upset for the rest of the reception. He said the least I could do was still give them the gift since they were already married and the money wouldn't change what happened. I blocked both of them. Update 2. 3 days after the wedding, my parents showed up at my apartment unannounced. They'd been getting pressure from my sister and her husband, and the extended family was choosing sides. They wanted me to apologize and give the couple their gift so everyone could move on. I showed them the breakdown of what I'd contributed. The $6,000 was just the final gift. Over the 8 months of engagement, I'd also paid for her bridal shower venue, $800, contributed to the bachelorette party expenses for $100, covered the cost of bridesmaid dress alterations when one of the girls couldn't afford it, $200, and given money for various other wedding-related expenses that came up, $600. The total was over $8,000. My parents seemed shocked by the amount. My mother admitted she didn't realize I'd been contributing so much beyond the main gift. When I explained that I'd done all of this gladly because I wanted to support my sister, but that being labeled as non-essential despite my contributions felt like a slap in the face, they started to understand my perspective. My dad asked why I hadn't just talked to my sister privately instead of taking the gift and leaving. I told him I tried to find her to ask about the wristband situation, but she was busy with her essential guests. Besides, after years of accommodating her behavior and always being the one to smooth things over, I was done being the bigger person. That evening, I got a call from my sister's maid of honor. She told me she'd been feeling guilty since the wedding because she'd been the one to suggest the wristband system. She'd seen it at another wedding and thought it was a clever way to manage different groups of guests. She admitted she hadn't thought about how hurtful it would be for the people who got excluded. She also told me something that made my blood boil. My sister had apparently been complaining for months about having to invite certain people, including me. She'd said I was always trying to insert myself into her business, and that she wished she could have just a small wedding with people who actually mattered to her. The maid of honor had assumed my sister was just venting stress and didn't realize how serious she was. She apologized for enabling the situation and said she tried to convince my sister to call me and apologize properly, but my sister was insisting that I was overreacting. Update 3. A week and a half after the wedding, I finally answered one of my sister's calls. She was crying and said she missed me and wanted to fix things between us. She claimed she'd been horrified when she realized I'd been put with the obligation guests and that it was all a terrible mistake. I asked her directly if she'd known about the 3-tier wristband system, and after a long pause, she admitted that she had. She said it seemed like a good idea at the time because she wanted her closest friends and family to have the best experience, and she thought the people in the other room would be fine with a simpler celebration. When I asked her why I'd been put in that category, she got defensive. She said I'd been intense about the wedding planning, always asking about details and offering opinions. She felt like I was trying to control her day because I was contributing money. She thought giving me space in the other room would actually be better for both of us. I was stunned. All my involvement in her wedding had been because she'd asked for help, asked for money, asked for support. Every time I'd offered an opinion or asked about plans, it was because I was invested in making her day special, and she'd interpreted that as me being controlling and intrusive. I told her that if she'd felt that way, she should have been honest instead of taking my money and then excluding me. She started crying harder and said she knew she'd handled everything wrong, but that taking the gift back had humiliated her in front of everyone, and she didn't know how to face people now. The conversation ended with her begging me to come to their post-wedding dinner the following weekend. She promised things would be different and that she wanted to make it up to me. Against my better judgment, I agreed to think about it. But then I talked to my aunt again, the one who'd been in the exile room with me. She told me she'd heard through the family grapevine that my sister and her husband were planning to ask me to give them the $6,000 as a late wedding gift at the dinner, and that my parents were in on the plan. The idea was that in a family setting with everyone watching, I'd feel pressured to be generous and forgive everything. That was it for me. The manipulation, the assumption that I'd just roll over and pay for the privilege of being treated badly, I was done. Final update. I didn't go to the post-wedding dinner. Instead, I wrote my sister a letter explaining exactly how her actions had affected me and what the money I'd contributed actually represented. I told her that the $8,000 plus I'd spent wasn't just money. It was my way of showing love and support for her new marriage. Being categorized as non-essential after that level of contribution wasn't something I could just get over. I also wrote that I was tired of our relationship being one-sided, where I was expected to accommodate her feelings and behavior while mine were dismissed as oversensitivity. I told her I loved her, but needed space to figure out if we could have a healthier relationship going forward. The response was immediate and ugly. She called me selfish and vindictive. She said I'd always been jealous of her, and that this was just me finding an excuse to ruin her happiness. Her husband sent me a message saying I was a terrible brother and that they were better off without me in their lives. My parents were disappointed, but seemed to finally understand that this wasn't just about one bad day. My mother admitted that she'd always pushed me to be the accommodating one in conflicts with my sister, and she could see how that had led to this situation. It's been 3 weeks now, and the dust is starting to settle. Some family members have reached out to say they support my decision, while others think I went too far. My aunt told me that several people at the wedding were talking about how wrong the wristband system was, and that my sister's reputation in the family has taken a hit. I've used the $6,000 to book a solo trip to Europe, something I'd been putting off for years because I was always saving money for family obligations or emergencies. It feels good to spend that money on something that's actually for me. My sister and I haven't spoken since the letter. I'm sad about losing that relationship, but I'm also relieved to be free from the constant cycle of her creating drama and me cleaning it up. Maybe someday we can rebuild something healthier, but that would require her to acknowledge that her behavior was wrong, not just inconvenient. For now, I'm focusing on relationships where I'm valued and respected, not just tolerated as a non-essential obligation. The people who truly matter in my life would never make me feel like I have to earn my place at their table. Looking back, I think my sister did me a favor with those neon green wristbands. She showed me exactly how she sees me, and now I can make decisions based on that reality instead of the relationship I thought we had. Sometimes the truth hurts, but it also sets you free. I don't regret taking that envelope back. It was the first time in years I stood up for myself with her, and it felt like reclaiming my self-respect. She wanted a wedding with only essential people? Well, now she knows what it costs to decide your brother isn't one of them.